Kumlan and Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Nun Bov. This is the second day, Yom Tov, Pesach. We're actually up to the Mishnah on the very bottom of the page. Also, wish everybody a kosher and a Pesach. You know, they say that we wish Chag kosher and Sameach. Well, you know, we don't say that in any other Yom Tov. Kosher is referring to the matzahs, and Sameach is referring to the wine. So therefore we say chag kosher, that the wine, that the matzah should be kosher, and three letters because there are three matzahs, and this sameach is referring to the wine, and there are four letters, the arba cases. And just before we begin, famous word that we say by Hal Eim Habonim Samecha, Hallelujah, who is this aim that makes the children happy with all the children? Obviously, the whole family is together on Yom Tov. What a beautiful moment it is. But aim of these are tables of the Aleph Mem that always took us out of the deepest throes of Golus. First Golus Mitzrayim, so Aleph Mem was Adon and Meisha. Second big one was Haman and Rasha, who tried to annihilate everyone. Aleph Mem is Esther and Mordechai, and the current Golus that we find ourselves is Aleph Mem Eliyahu Mashiach, should be recorded Mamish. We're up to the Mishnah. The following things, we're learning all the dinim of Aino, of misleading, of deceptive selling, but the following things, there's no din of Aino. Avodim, when it comes to selling slaves, or even if you overcharge, or hashtaris, a contract loan, a loan contract, and somebody, let's say, sells a loan contract, and there's no din of Aino regarding that, as we'll soon see why not. The hakakoi, so too when it comes to property, if let's say the gab, there's no din of Aino when it comes to selling property. Now there's a big machlekes of shaynim when we say there's no din of Aino. What does that mean? Does that mean that there's no compensation? You don't have to refund the money, or the deal is not null or void? Or does it mean that you're actually permitted to do it? The Ramban learns clearly in Chumash there's still an Isam HaTorah to cheat when it comes to property. It's only that there's no financial reimbursement taking place. Other Rishonim hold, in fact, Rashi clearly, in Bava Metzia, the first Rashi in Gemara, clearly says there's no Issa of Leisainu when it comes to Kakoyes or Avodim Rishtanis. There's no Issa. And part of what is the logic is, according to some Rishonim, is because property will always be there, and if it's not worth that price today, it will be worth that price tomorrow. Not like metalkin that are perishable, that eventually disappear, and you were cheated. Others of the Rishonim learn it's merely a gzeres hakasset. The Gemara learns out from Sukkim, there's no real logic to it. So too, hegedashis. If the gabbai of hegdish wants to sell hegdish, or if somebody has a carbon oila, and after contracts a blemish, he wants to sell it. There's no laws of cheating there. Not only that, if somebody stole it, you don't pay that extra penalty double, nor do you pay that 4 or 5 times if you check to sell it. Then Shem Mechinim, when it comes to another case, Shem Mechinim, somebody who is a Shem Mechinim, he's doing the person a favor, so the only liability he really has is sheer negligence. Otherwise, he's totally exonerated from theft or if it's lost and so on. He doesn't have to swear that he wasn't negligent, because it does not make you have to swear. Big machlekes Rishonim. What about the other shuls? Does he don't have to swear like Einoi B'Shusay? No, we had been before. A shema generally makes 3 shuls. A shema swears that he wasn't negligent. A shema swears shalachti bayad, that he didn't, abuse it, to use it for himself. And a shema swears that she'ein b'shusay, that it's not in the shus. Plus, he has to swear if it was an accident, what the accident was. So when we say Shem Mechinim doesn't swear, what exactly is he not swearing? And is he not swearing merely the shvu about like Peshaitiba? Is he not swearing the shvu of Ein Shusay? Ein B'Shusay is a Panos Chachamim. Which shvu is he not swearing? The big machlekes. Another big machlekes is the Rambam, the Raibid, which is a famous machlekes about if a shemer was pesheya, Shemechina was pesheya by hegdish, does he have to pay or not? Because according to the Rambam, Shia has nothing to do with the laws of Shmira. He's exempt from the laws of Shmira, but nevertheless, like it says here, they don't pay. If it was stolen, they don't pay. But do you pay if it was negligent? The Rambam says definitely you do, because the Rambam says that Pshia is considered a mazik. It's not a din in Shemrim, it's actually a din in being a mazik. You damage someone's property, so you still have to pay. And the Raibit says no, but you don't have to pay for Pshia at all, because Pshia is part of the din of Shmira. Shimon comes along and says, those cut you say upon yourself, Harei alai, you take upon yourself to bring a carbon. So you take upon yourself to bring a carbon, so if something happens to that carbon, you're liable. So then you're considered an owner to it. So yesh lahen oinah. There is oinah here. For example, you set aside a carbon, you had a mum, and then you sold it. Because otherwise you shouldn't sell it, Rashi says. So therefore, once it has a blemish, you sell it. So over there is a law of oinah, because it's like a private sale. Only if you're not liable, for example, he said, this animal, the animal dies and found, too bad. And again, there's a big machlekes of shayim. If a court of Shimon holds that kachim that you are liable, does that mean that I have the right to actually sell it? Can he sell his carbon shlomim? Because it's a davar hagoyim lamammon, something that can turn into money. So therefore, does that mean I'm an owner right now and I have the right to sell it? The says no. Only when do we say davar hagoyim lamammon kemamadam, the animal no longer exists? Now it's worth money. But while the animal is still here, it's not sure that I can have the right to sell it. In fact, Rashi clearly says here, if it contracted a mum, then you can sell it. But others disagree. And others hold differently. Says the Mishnah further. Rabbi Yehuda says, if you sell a sefer Torah, a behemoth, or an animal, or margolis, or a precious stone, Ein lehem, I know there's no deception there, even if you overcharge, there's no means of recourse. And we'll just talk about them in the next few days. They said to him, they disagree. Only the following, the only ones that we mentioned before, and that's it. Says the Gemara, how do you know this? It's all about we learn. If you make a sale to your friend, you bought something from your friend, it says miyad, something that is transferable. Davar hanikne miyad liyad, only something that is transferable from hand to hand. And Rashi adds that that's when you have the Isser of Baltain, which seems to imply that Rashi holds, and this is how Rashi, that there is that when it comes to property, not only there's no question of compensation, there's no Isser at all. Exception is karka because it's not something transferable. Avodim are always equated to property because it says so therefore it's like a nachla, like an inheritance, like a bequeathment of property. And therefore it has the same meaning. Exception is shtaris, only something that it itself has intrinsic value, the gufe konik. The exception is a star, she'ein gufan mocher ve'ein gufan konik. A star has no intrinsic value. The only what a star is, mainly a document to support or corroborate something that happened. And therefore, because it has no intrinsic value, there's no know when it comes to property. Says star. Says the Gemara, from here on the other hand, we learn out if you sell your star to use the paper itself as a cover, let's say for spices, then yesh lehem oinah. There are the dinim of oinah because then it has intrinsic value. So isn't that obvious? It's no different than any other metal where there is oinah. As you want to know, this comes to negate Rav Kahana, the opinion of Kahana. The Amud says, "Ein oinah leprutus." He said there is no oinah when it comes to coin, only when it comes to silver. Something so little value, there's no oinah. And we're talking about to use this as a cover for boisim, it has very little value. And to tell you there is oinah there. There is a Dacious. How do you know that there's no oinah when it comes to hektish? Because on Makro, it says in Pasuk you shouldn't cheat your brother. So we don't have the laws of cheating by hektish. You're taking literally that when it says there yodoi, that it has to be something transferable from hand to hand. So you're saying when the pasuk says means literally taking an object from the hand of your friend. Well, I'm going to demonstrate to you that we find the word yad, it doesn't mean physically taking from the hand, it means from his ownership. Where do we see that? Let's see what it says. Vayikach is called Artzeh. It says he took the entire land. Miyode from his hand. How can he take land from his hand? But he was holding on to his land. Nokla, that he was holding on to it. It means from his ownership. No, it means his ownership. Says the Gemara. So we see that yad does not mean your hand. So how do you know it means necessarily metal? So Moses counters back. I'm going to prove to you that yad does mean literally your hand. And we need a special pasuk to expand it and say it means your domain. You find that by Geneva, you find that by Gittin, which we had previously in the previous Gemaras. When it said the word yad, it doesn't mean literally your hand. But Tanya, we learned in Gemara Bava Metzia, a few places. You found that in his hand. In his hand. I know if it found on his roof, on his courtyard, on his porch. How do you know that he's also liable for being a ganef? And as Rashi adds, he had to close the door. And the Tzeitzach Choshen learns from here that the only time you become a ganef is if you did a physical act to become a ganef. If it happens by itself, even though you consent that because in other words, the big machlekes is what's the geneva? Isur geneva is the act of taking or the act of holding it. If it's the act of taking, then you need a ma'aser. If it's the act of holding it, even though it came into my rishus own, but if I don't let it out, I'm a galif as well. So Rashi says here you need a ma'aser, which means the geneva is the act. And there are ramifications in halacha, as we learned in Bava Kama in the 7th period. As long as you found it in your hand. In other words, we first thought that says yodi merely your hand. So we see clearly how we understand yodi, a hand, limited hand. Means literally the hand. Pursue, and I'll give another proof. Tanya, we learned by a get, you place it in her hand. So the Gemara said, all we know is if it's in her hand. How do you know that if we put it anywhere else? Timer, the Kasher Rahman says Vinas. If the Torah would not have said Vinasan, I would have thought called Heiche because of Yod Mamish. If not for the word Vinasan, I would have taken it literally. That means you have to place the get inside her hand. So what do we see from all of this? The word Yod means hand. So how do you know then? Sorry. So Yod literally means that it has to be a hand. So therefore, what's the Rabba Bamama's question? Yoda means shus, it means hand, and that's why we know that when it comes to oino, it's only something which is transferable, not proper. What are we going to do with that pasuk? It says Vayikach. It says that he took his whole land miyod from his hand. So the more explains. Yoda means hand. Shiny hosam. Where you have no choice, an alternative, you have no choice. In his possession. Boy, Rab Zayda asks a question. Schidis yesh loy ana, ein loy ana. Rab Zayda asks a question. What about renting? How do we treat renting? Is renting considered buying, or is renting considered merely renting? And in Allah, actually, we have different proofs in a number of places in Avodah Zarah, Psachim, and later on the Gemara as well. How do we treat a rental? Do we treat a rental as if it's your ownership, not ownership? By Chametz and Pesach and Abdallah and Pesach, it's a seicher who has to, to clean out the house with Chametz. So how do we understand schidus? Is schidus like buying for a short term, or is schidus totally different category? So you want to know whether there's a no or not. You overcharge somebody for the rent. But if there's schidus or no, Memkam Rachmana buying and selling, I will let schidus, but not renting. Or dimoloshma makes no difference. Amlebaye mixi, let's say Mimker, Eilam, let's say anyway you sold forever. Mimker stomach sell. Renting is considered as if it's a sale for a day, and therefore we treat it like mechira, at least in this instance. As we want to further, boy, that's the interesting question. What about chitin? You took wheat, vizoron bekarka, and you planted in the ground. So now the question is: do we view the seeds of the wheat as if it's a portable? Somebody therefore there's the concept of a no there. Or not. You sold the wheat, the seeds that you plant in the ground. Or do we say now that it's planted in the ground, it forms part of the ground? It's karka, there's no. Yes, may no. Do we say command the shadyan bekadadami as if it's lying there in a barrel? The yesh lahem know, and therefore there is a no, it's considered a metalkut. Or maybe we say it's considered not part of the ground, and there's no know by karka, nor is there I know by this. We're talking about it didn't take root. We took root. We don't talk about it. It's part of the ground. Didn't take root yet. In fact, based on this, the whole machlekes of Shabbos, if you take seeds out of the ground, where you oike, where your kites is, they're considered as if you did one of the 39 malachas of harvesting. Do we say kimunach bekada, just lying there, and therefore it's not really harvesting, or do we say that now it's in the ground? And others say you cannot compare the commercial law to the laws of Shabbos. Hey, Chedami, I'm going to analyze it further. What are we talking about? Ilay Dami Shadai. What's the case? He said Shadai Boshis. That was he said I put the six, let's say six seeds. Well, also said he came along with witnesses. Or that he said I put in the six saw a certain measure of seeds. Came along with witnesses said no. Only five. In other words, you cheated me by a sixth. So is that I know? Didn't Rabbi say called over should be anything to do with a measure mishkol weight? So if we talk about how many saw, we're talking about an exact measure, then even the minutest difference is already considered cheating. Even less than a no it's a mekartos. This is different than a no. I know it's not a mekartos. As we'll see tomorrow later, mekartos is I cheated you. I know I didn't tell you that it's worth $5 and I'm charging. I didn't tell you that it's worth $6, and I just say I'm charging you $6. So so it's different than it's deceptive, but it's different than mekachtos. But if it's something that can be measured, I told you it's 6, so it actually is 5. That's a mekachtos. So the whole thing unravels. So why do you have to have a 6, even the minutest amount? Ella. The Omar, he said, Shaboy, Shadoy, but the boy, I put in exactly what the ground needs in order to have the outcome that you want to have an outcome. And I thought that this would be sufficient amount, these many seeds in this amount of land. That it wasn't enough, that he couldn't get the yield that he expected with the current amount that you did. So yes, the question is there a no or not? If it's less than a 6, okay, but if it's a 6, is there a no or not? And that's the question there. Okay, so it's not a mekachtos. It's an assessment. Commander Shor, it's like you put it in a barrel, yes, no, and therefore it's metalton to no. But it's not part of the ground, and therefore there's no longer a no. Nishboy, now another question, same idea. Let's say I said, I thought you put in 6 soin and you only put in 5, and the guy says, no, I put 5.5. So he's made him a mix. He didn't do the full amount, he didn't get full yield, but it's more than what you say. So Nishboy now laying. Now we know you don't swear by mixes and cart. Do you swear in this instance? Or English boy in a lane? Do we say command the shot of as he's lying in a barrel, is boy in a lane? Do you swear? Then it's Martin about car, it's part of the ground. Anyway, they don't swear. Next one is Matirin. That where, let's say, if you put in the ground and right now the Gemara thinks that he starts taking root. Matirin is the second day of Pesach, which is actually interesting. This is the Gemara we're learning on the second day of Pesach. So that's what we're talking about. The oimer that you bring the second day of Pesach, which permits you to eat all the new crop, the crop that had to be already in the ground and growing. Oimer matirin, does it matter? Ain't oimer matirin, or is not matter? Let's analyze this last question. If it took root, and we already learned that the oimer is matter, even if you didn't harvest it, as long as it was already growing. The either loyash did not take root, just sitting in the ground. Then we also learned that it's not included in oimer. So now we learned image. If it took root before the second day of Pesach, then fine. Then the oimer is matzid. Bimlav asun is forbidden. Achi yava oimer abod. So the following year, we're talking about here. This is the case. The chatzdinu, you had the wheat growing. You then cut part of that wheat off. So that wheat is definitely mutter with the chodesh, but you cut part of it off, and you harvested it, and you put it back into the ground to grow again. The chazdinu v'zarinu koilem, and you put it back in the ground before the oimer, and now the oimer went by before it was able to take root the second time. So the question is, it itself should have been all right, but because you put it in the ground, it would say it loses its original status. It now forms part of the ground, and therefore the oimer hasn't yet. And you need to wait for the new oimer. Lost the oimer, the chol would pass below ashes and not take root. Can you go ahead and eat? Command the shadi because it's lying in a barrel. The sharinu, therefore permitted it. It's bottled around and it's not teku. It remains a question. Okay, stop here, and then we should have a good Yom Tif, and we'll continue Mishra tomorrow.